I should have known Marcus would try to sabotage my promotion. For 28 years, my older brother had perfected the art of undermining my achievements while positioning himself as the concerned sibling, just looking out for me. But this time his interference would cost him everything. Growing up as the younger sister in a family that worshipped Marcus's every accomplishment, I'd learned to keep my successes small and quiet. When I made honor roll, Marcus would remind everyone that grades didn't matter as much as real-world experience. When I got into a good college, he'd point out that book smarts weren't the same as street smarts. When I landed my first job at Morrison & Associates Marketing, he'd warned the family that corporate environments were toxic, and I was too sensitive to handle office politics. The pattern was always the same. Marcus positioned himself as the successful, practical older brother, while casting me as the emotional, naive little sister who needed protection from her own ambitions. Our parents bought into this narrative completely, constantly asking Marcus to keep an eye on my career choices and offering him opportunities to advise me on professional decisions. What they didn't see was how systematically Marcus undermined my confidence behind the scenes. Every promotion opportunity came with his warnings about office politics. Every professional achievement was met with concerns about whether I was getting too big for my britches. Every workplace challenge became evidence that I wasn't cut out for corporate success. During my first year at Morrison & Associates, I'd started documenting our conversations about my career. Not because I planned to use the evidence, but because I was beginning to question my own perceptions. Was I really as emotional and unprofessional as Marcus suggested, or was something else happening here? The documentation revealed a disturbing pattern. Every time I mentioned a success at work, Marcus would find reasons to diminish it. When I told him about leading a successful client presentation, he worried that I was showing off and might alienate my colleagues. When I shared that my supervisor had praised my strategic thinking, he cautioned that praise could be superficial, and I shouldn't get overconfident. My supervisor at Morrison & Associates, Jennifer Park, had been encouraging my career development since my second year. She'd watched me successfully manage increasingly complex client accounts, lead cross-departmental projects, and consistently exceed my performance targets. When the Director of Strategic Planning position opened up, she strongly encouraged me to apply. "Rachel, you have the strongest combination of analytical skills and client relationship management I've seen in my 10 years here," Jennifer said during our quarterly review. "Your campaign for the Henderson Tech account increased their ROI by 340%, and 3 clients have specifically requested to work with you again. You're ready for this promotion." I felt excited about the opportunity, but Marcus's voice was already in my head, questioning whether I was overreaching, whether the promotion would be too much stress, whether I was setting myself up for failure. Still, I decided to apply, carefully preparing my portfolio and presentation for the interview process. The application process went smoothly. I'd built strong relationships across departments, my performance metrics were consistently high, and my client testimonials were glowing. The interview panel seemed impressed with my strategic vision for the department and my plans for expanding client services. That's when Marcus offered to help with networking support for my promotion. He'd recently started working at a consulting firm that occasionally partnered with Morrison & Associates, and he suggested he might be able to put in a good word for me with people he'd met from my company. I should have recognized this as a red flag, but I was nervous about the promotion and grateful for any support. The first sign something was wrong came 2 weeks after my final interview. Jennifer called me into her office with a confused expression. She'd received a call from HR asking about my emotional stability, and whether she had concerns about my ability to handle the increased responsibilities of the director role. They said they'd received a call from someone claiming to be your brother, expressing concerns about your stress management and whether this promotion might be too much pressure for you, Jennifer explained. I told them that was completely contrary to everything I've observed. You're one of the most level-headed, professional people on my team. Have you been having any concerns about the promotion that you haven't mentioned? My stomach dropped. I knew immediately what had happened, but I needed to understand the full scope. That afternoon, I called HR directly and spoke with Maria Santos, our HR director. We received a call from someone identifying himself as Marcus Chin, your brother, Maria explained. He said he works in consulting and has experience with similar corporate environments. He expressed concerns that you might be in over your head with this promotion, that you tend to get overwhelmed under pressure, and that the family was worried about the impact on your mental health. I felt my face flush with anger and humiliation. Marcus had never seen me work. He had no basis for assessing my professional capabilities. The only stress he'd witnessed was the anxiety I felt whenever he undermined my confidence. "Maria, I need you to know that everything my brother told you is false," I said, keeping my voice steady. "He has no knowledge of my work performance or my ability to handle professional responsibilities. My brother has a pattern of sabotaging my career opportunities, and I have documentation of this behavior going back several years." Maria was quiet for a moment. "That's very concerning. Can you provide that documentation? We need to review this situation carefully before making any decisions about the promotion." I spent the next week compiling evidence. Screenshots of text messages where Marcus dismissed my achievements. Email threads where he'd suggested I was getting ahead of myself, professionally. Documentation of conversations where he'd warned me against applying for promotions or taking on leadership roles. But the most damaging evidence came when I started investigating whether Marcus had contacted anyone else at my company. I reached out to colleagues in different departments, asking if anyone had received inquiries about me from someone claiming to be my brother. The results were devastating. Marcus had called the accounting department, expressing concerns about whether I could handle budget management responsibilities. He'd contacted our IT department, suggesting I might not be technically savvy enough for a strategic role. He'd even called our largest client, Henderson Tech, introducing himself as my brother and asking if they'd had any concerns about working with me. Jennifer was horrified when I showed her the documentation. "Rachel, this is systematic sabotage of your career. This goes beyond normal family dynamics. This is deliberate interference with your professional reputation and opportunities." Together, we prepared a comprehensive response for HR and the executive team. Jennifer provided additional documentation of my performance, including client feedback, project outcomes, and peer evaluations. She detailed specific examples of my leadership skills, my ability to handle pressure, and my professional demeanor in challenging situations. The response from our CEO, David Morrison, came faster than I expected. He called me into his office on a Friday afternoon in November, along with Jennifer and Maria from HR. "Rachel, I've reviewed all the documentation you provided and I've spoken with Jennifer extensively about your performance," Mr. Morrison began. "I need to start by apologizing. We should have come to you directly when we received concerning information about your capabilities, rather than investigating behind the scenes. That was a failure on our part." I held my breath, waiting for the rejection I was sure was coming. However, after reviewing everything, your performance record, your client relationships, Jennifer's detailed assessments, and this unfortunate family situation, I've reached a decision about the director position. My heart was pounding as I waited for his next words. "I'm promoting you to Director of Strategic Planning, effective immediately, with a 25% salary increase and expanded authority over client strategy development. Additionally, I'm creating a new position for you, Department Head of Client Relations, which will give you oversight of both strategic planning and account management." I was so shocked I could barely respond. "Furthermore," Mr. Morrison continued, "I want you to know that what your brother did was completely inappropriate and potentially illegal. No one outside this company should be contacting our departments making inquiries about employees. We're implementing new protocols to prevent this kind of interference, and we're considering whether to pursue legal action against your brother for corporate harassment." After the meeting, I sat in my new office, an actual office with a door and windows, trying to process what had just happened. I'd gone from thinking my promotion was dead to receiving an even better position than I'd originally applied for. But the story didn't end there. Mr. Morrison had been serious about investigating Marcus's interference. Our legal department reached out to Marcus's employer, Pinnacle Consulting, to inform them that one of their employees had been making unauthorized contact with our company, potentially interfering with our internal personnel decisions. The response from Pinnacle was swift and decisive. Marcus's supervisor, James Wright, called Mr. Morrison directly to apologize and get more details about the situation. "We take this extremely seriously," Mr. Wright told Mr. Morrison. "Our employees are strictly prohibited from interfering with other companies' internal processes, especially personnel decisions. This violates our professional ethics guidelines and our client confidentiality standards. Within a week, Marcus was fired from Pinnacle Consulting. The official reason was violation of professional ethics standards and unauthorized contact with partner organizations. But the real impact went beyond just losing his job. Word spread quickly through the consulting industry about why Marcus had been terminated, making it extremely difficult for him to find new employment. The consequences for Marcus extended beyond his professional life. Our parents, who had always positioned him as the successful, responsible older brother, were forced to confront the reality of what he'd done. When they learned that he'd been systematically sabotaging my career for years, they were shocked and disappointed. "We never knew he was doing this," my mother said during a difficult family conversation. "We thought he was just being protective, looking out for you. We had no idea he was actively interfering with your work." My father was even more direct. "What Marcus did was wrong. It was dishonest and it could have seriously damaged your career. There's no excuse for that kind of behavior." The family dynamics shifted dramatically. Marcus, who had always been the golden child, was now the one facing scrutiny and disappointment from our parents. Meanwhile, I was finally receiving recognition for my professional achievements without his constant undermining. At Morrison & Associates, my promotion was met with enthusiasm from colleagues who had watched my work for years. The Henderson Tech account that I'd managed so successfully became a case study for client relationship management. My strategic planning initiatives were being implemented across multiple departments. 6 months into my new role, I was invited to speak at the Regional Marketing Association conference about innovative client relationship strategies. My presentation was well received, and several companies approached me about consulting opportunities. For the first time in my career, I was being recognized as an expert in my field rather than questioned about my capabilities. The most validating moment came during my annual performance review with Mr. Morrison. "Rachel, your promotion has been one of the best personnel decisions I've made in my 20 years running this company. Our client retention is up 40%, our strategic planning process is more efficient, and other departments are asking to model their management structure after yours." He paused, then continued, "I also want you to know that we've had inquiries from other companies trying to recruit you. Your reputation in the industry has grown significantly this year. While I hope you'll stay with us, I want you to know that your career options are wide open." The transformation in my professional confidence was remarkable. Without Marcus's constant undermining, I was able to trust my own judgment and take appropriate risks. I implemented new client service protocols that increased satisfaction scores. I developed strategic partnerships that brought in 3 major new accounts. I mentored junior staff members and helped several of them earn promotions. Marcus, meanwhile, was struggling to rebuild his career. The consulting industry is relatively small, and word about his termination had spread. Several firms had rejected his applications once they learned about the circumstances of his departure from Pinnacle. He eventually found a position at a much smaller firm, with significantly reduced responsibilities and compensation. The family gatherings became less frequent and more awkward. Marcus's fall from grace was difficult for everyone to navigate, especially our parents, who had invested so much in the narrative of his success. I tried to be gracious about the situation, but I also maintained clear boundaries about discussing my career with him. A year after my promotion, I received an unexpected call from James Wright at Pinnacle Consulting. They were looking for a new director of client strategy, and my reputation in the industry had caught their attention. The irony wasn't lost on me. The company that had fired Marcus for sabotaging my career was now trying to recruit me. "We've been following your work at Morrison & Associates," Mr. Wright explained. "Your innovative approach to client relationships and strategic planning is exactly what we're looking for. We'd like to discuss a significant opportunity with substantial growth potential." I was flattered but ultimately decided to stay at Morrison & Associates, where I had strong relationships and continued opportunities for advancement. Mr. Morrison had already begun discussing the possibility of making me a junior partner within the next 2 years. The most rewarding aspect of my career growth was the mentoring opportunities that came with my new position. I made it a priority to support other employees who seemed to be struggling with confidence or family pressure. I could recognize the signs of external undermining because I'd experienced it myself. One junior account manager, Lisa, reminded me of myself 2 years earlier, talented and hardworking but constantly second-guessing her abilities. During our one-on-one meetings, I learned that her father had been discouraging her from pursuing management roles, suggesting she wasn't leadership material. "Lisa, I want you to focus on the objective measures of your performance," I told her. "Your client feedback scores are consistently high, your project management skills are excellent, and your strategic thinking is sophisticated. Those are facts, not opinions. Trust the data about your capabilities rather than external voices that might not have your best interests at heart." With encouragement and mentoring, Lisa applied for and received a promotion to senior account manager within 6 months. Watching her confidence grow reminded me how much damage family sabotage could do, and how powerful professional validation could be in counteracting it. 2 years after my promotion, I was indeed offered a junior partnership at Morrison & Associates. The ceremony was attended by colleagues, clients, and industry partners who had worked with me over the years. The validation from the professional community was overwhelming in the best possible way. My parents attended the partnership celebration, finally seeing objective evidence of my professional success. My mother later admitted that she'd never fully understood my work before, but seeing the respect I commanded from colleagues and clients helped her appreciate my capabilities. "I realize now that we may have held you back by always asking Marcus to advise you," she said. "We thought we were being helpful, but we didn't understand how successful you were on your own." Marcus was not invited to the celebration. Our relationship had never recovered from his sabotage, and I'd accepted that it probably never would. The damage to trust was too significant, and his actions had been too deliberate to chalk up to misguided concern. As I settled into my role as junior partner, I reflected on how dramatically my career trajectory had changed once the sabotage stopped. Without Marcus's constant undermining, I'd been able to take appropriate risks, trust my judgment, and build on my successes rather than constantly questioning my capabilities. The promotion that Marcus had tried to prevent became the foundation for everything that followed. The confidence I gained from Mr. Morrison's validation created a positive cycle. Success led to more opportunities, which led to more success, which led to industry recognition and partnership. Most importantly, I'd learned to distinguish between genuine concern and disguised sabotage. Marcus's worry about my stress levels had really been about maintaining his position as the successful sibling. His protection from office politics had really been about preventing me from developing professional relationships and skills. The workplace investigation that followed Marcus's interference also led to important policy changes at Morrison & Associates. We now have clear protocols for handling outside inquiries about employees, and we provide training to managers about recognizing signs of family or personal sabotage that might affect employee performance. "Your situation taught us something important about supporting our employees holistically," Mr. Morrison told me during a recent meeting. "We can't just focus on work performance. We need to be aware of external factors that might be undermining our people's confidence and career development." 3 years after that first sabotaged promotion, I'm thriving in ways I never imagined possible. My client portfolio includes some of the region's largest companies. My strategic planning methodologies are being adopted by other firms. I'm frequently invited to speak at industry conferences and serve on professional development committees. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome is that Marcus's sabotage ultimately led to greater success than I would have achieved without his interference. Mr. Morrison's response to the situation, promoting me beyond my original application and creating new opportunities, demonstrated the kind of leadership and support that has characterized my entire experience at Morrison & Associates. The junior partnership that seemed impossible when Marcus was constantly undermining my confidence now feels like just the beginning. Mr. Morrison has already discussed the timeline for full partnership, and I'm developing strategic initiatives that could position me for executive leadership within the next 5 years. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals create opportunities for the most meaningful victories. Marcus's attempt to sabotage my promotion didn't just fail. It led to career advancement beyond anything I'd originally imagined, supported by leaders who believe in my capabilities and a professional community that values my contributions. The girl who once questioned her own judgment because of her brother's constant criticism has become a business leader whose strategies are being implemented across the industry. And it all started with one promotion that my brother tried to prevent, but that ultimately became the foundation for everything that followed.
You'll never prove it was me. Amanda's voice slithered through the speaker, laced with smug satisfaction. Everyone knows you're just jealous because I'm the favorite daughter-in-law now. Good luck explaining this to the family. I stared at the loan documents spread across my desk, my pulse pounding against my ribs. $75,000. Taken out in my name. The signature, almost perfect, wasn't mine, but close enough to fool anyone who wasn't trained to spot forgeries. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 32, I had just discovered my sister-in-law had stolen my identity. Amanda, I said, forcing my voice into a measured calm. Years of professional training clicked into place. Taking out a loan in someone else's name? That's identity theft, a federal crime. She laughed, sharp and mocking. Oh please, no one's going to believe you. I've already told everyone you're making up lies because you're bitter. Even Mark thinks you're just being paranoid. Mark, my husband of 5 years, forever caught between keeping the peace and ignoring the obvious. Amanda had burrowed into our lives like a parasite after her divorce 6 months ago. Hovering, snooping, feigning concern about our finances while rifling through our mail when she thought we weren't looking. Besides, he added sweetly, the money's gone. Spent. What are you going to do about it? Amanda had no idea who she was dealing with. 15 years in digital forensics for major financial institutions meant I'd seen it all. Fraud, forgery, financial manipulation. I knew how these schemes played out. More importantly, I knew how to dismantle them. Thanks for letting me know, I said smoothly, my thumb tapping the record button on my phone. Anything else you'd like to confess? Oh, getting all formal now. Fine. I took the loan because I deserve it more than you do. You're just a boring office worker. I'm trying to build something for myself. The family understands. They'll side with me, not you. I ended the call, exhaling slowly. Then I got to work. Opening my laptop, I accessed the secure system my team used to investigate financial fraud. The loan application had been submitted online. Amateur move. Every digital footprint, every IP address, every keystroke left a trail. I followed it. Within the hour, I had my evidence. The application had been submitted from Amanda's apartment. My stolen social security number, her own email as a secondary contact. Sloppy, textbook identity theft. My phone buzzed. Mark. Liv, Amanda just called me crying, he started, his voice tight with concern. She says you're accusing her of something. You know she's been struggling since the divorce. Mark, I cut in, steady but firm. Come home. Now, there's something you need to see. Can't this wait? She's really upset. No, it can't. Your sister took out a $75,000 loan in my name. I have proof. Silence. Then finally, a hesitant. I'll be home in 20 minutes. While I waited, I fortified my case. Loan records, deposit trails, email confirmations. I secured the call recording in multiple locations. There would be no wiggle room. Mark walked in looking pale. I met his gaze, then silently turned the laptop screen toward him. He scanned the documents. The color drained from his face. She really did this. Because she thought she could get away with it, I said. Because she thought I was just a boring office worker who wouldn't fight back. He sank into the chair, running a hand through his hair. What are you going to do? I pulled up the official fraud report, my finger hovering over the submit button. My job. I've spent my career helping people recover from identity theft. I'm not about to become a victim of it. She'll turn the family against us, he whispered. She can try, I said, pressing the button. But unlike Amanda, I know exactly what I'm doing. The wheels were in motion. By Monday morning, the bank's fraud team would have everything they needed. Amanda had underestimated me. Badly. One final message lit up my phone screen. Hope you're not too upset about the loan. Maybe this will teach you to be more generous with family. I smiled, took a screenshot, and added it to my evidence file. Amanda had just made the worst mistake of her life, and she didn't even know it yet. Monday morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. The sun barely touched the glass towers of downtown, and the air inside the fraud investigation department on the 23rd floor felt crisp with anticipation. Before I even settled into my chair, my phone buzzed violently. Amanda. What did you do? Her frantic text filled my screen. The bank just called me about suspicious activity on the loan. Fix this now. I silenced my phone and pulled at the case file I'd submitted. Every piece of evidence was airtight: IP addresses, timestamps, email trails, even her own arrogant boasts. Within hours, the department confirmed what I already knew. Amanda was guilty. The bank had frozen the remaining loan funds in her account. A knock at my door. "Mrs. Parker?" My colleague James peered in. "The police investigator is here to discuss the identity theft case you reported." Detective Miller, a seasoned professional with sharp eyes and a sharper instinct, flipped through my report, nodding as she reached the attached recording. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've seen," she said, making notes. "Your sister-in-law wasn't exactly subtle, was she?" "She never thought she had to be," I replied. "She assumed I was just some office worker who wouldn't know how to fight back." My phone vibrated again. This time, messages from Mark's parents. "How dare you accuse Amanda of theft? She's family. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Mark needs to control his wife. Control me? Interesting choice of words. By the time I got home that evening, Mark sat in the dark living room, his face shadowed with exhaustion. "Amanda's been crying all day," he murmured. "She says she'll lose everything if you don't drop the case. Mom and Dad, they're furious." I sat beside him, took his hand. "Mark, your sister committed fraud. She stole my identity, took out a massive loan, and laughed about it. What exactly do you expect me to do? Couldn't we just handle this privately? As a family?" His voice was almost pleading. I let out a slow breath. "Like when she borrowed your parents' credit cards, or when she accidentally opened accounts in your name." His expression told me he hadn't wanted to remember those. "This is why she keeps doing it, because no one ever stops her." Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera. Amanda. Her makeup was streaked, her face blotchy with tears. "Please," she begged, looking directly into the camera. "Just let me explain." I opened the door but didn't move aside. When she tried to push past me, I stood firm. "The bank froze everything," she wailed. "They're saying it's fraud. You have to tell them it was a mistake." "A mistake?" I tilted my head. "Was it a mistake when you stole my identity? When you bragged that I'd never prove it was you?" Her sobs stopped like a switch had flipped. Her face twisted into something uglier, something more familiar. "You stuck-up bitch," she spat. "You think you're so much better than everyone with your fancy job? Guess what? The family will never forgive you for this. You'll always be the outsider who tried to destroy their daughter." I pulled out my phone and pressed record. "Is that a threat, Amanda?" She blinked. Then, slowly, she noticed the security camera above us. Noticed my steady grip on the phone. Noticed, for the first time, that she wasn't in control. Her voice dropped. What exactly do you do at the bank?" I smiled. "I investigate financial fraud and identity theft, and I'm very, very good at it." "So, Amanda, would you like to explain again how you got my social security number?" The blood drained from her face. Behind me, Mark exhaled as if waking up from a long, heavy sleep. "You've been playing us all along," Amanda whispered, acting like some boring pencil pusher when really I was just doing my job. I finished for her. "Speaking of which, Detective Miller will be in touch soon. She'd love to hear your side of the story." Amanda stood frozen, speechless for the first time in her life. I shut the door, and for the first time in her life, she was alone with the consequences of her own actions. The aftermath of Amanda's identity theft swept through the family like a storm, tearing apart long-held illusions. Detective Miller moved swiftly, assembling an airtight case from my evidence. 3 days later, Amanda was arrested, and just like that, the carefully maintained facade of family unity crumbled. I was in my office, reviewing the final case report, when Mark's mother called. "We found more loans," she admitted, her voice stripped of its usual confidence. "In James's name. In ours. Amanda's been doing this for years. We never wanted to believe it." The investigation uncovered a pattern stretching back nearly a decade. Amanda had stolen almost $200,000 from family members, always spinning herself as the victim, always relying on their loyalty to shield her from consequences. Mark stood by me through the proceedings, seeing his sister clearly for the first time. One night, as we sat on the back porch, he exhaled a long, heavy breath. "I enabled her," he admitted. "We all did. Every time we covered for her, We made it easier for her to hurt someone else. Amanda took a plea deal, 5 years of probation, mandatory financial counseling, and a court-ordered repayment plan. But the family's response was what surprised me most. During a small, subdued family dinner, my father-in-law set down his fork and looked me in the eye. "We owe you an apology," he said. "When Amanda called you vindictive, we believed her, because it was easier than facing the truth. You didn't just protect yourself. You forced us to face something we should have confronted years ago." The table was quieter than usual. Amanda's empty chair was a stark reminder of all the years they'd ignored the signs, the times they'd made excuses, but there was also something new in the air: honesty. "I found more evidence," my mother-in-law murmured, hands tightening around her coffee cup. "Old bank statements, times when money went missing, when things didn't add up. We always convinced ourselves it was a mistake. We never wanted to see what was right in front of us." Under the table, Mark squeezed my hand. Small gestures of gratitude had become his way of showing me how much had changed. Our marriage, once defined by unspoken tensions, had strengthened. No more pretense, no more avoidance. Just truth. 3 months after Amanda's arrest, I found an envelope in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, but shakier than before. "Dear Olivia," it began. "I've spent a lot of time in counseling trying to understand why I did what I did. The easy answer is money. But the truth? I resented you. You built your success the right way while I was always looking for shortcuts. Telling myself you were boring and plain was easier than admitting I was jealous. I'm sorry, not just for stealing from you, but for every time I tried to tear you down to make myself feel bigger." I handed the letter to Mark, watching his face as he absorbed his sister's words. "She's finally getting help," he murmured. "Real help. Not just excuses and cover-ups." The family began to heal, slowly and deliberately. Weekly dinners resumed, but this time, conversations were more honest. My in-laws started therapy, learning to acknowledge their mistakes, to set boundaries, to rebuild trust piece by piece. A year later, I stood before an audience, accepting my promotion as head of the fraud investigation department. Looking out, I saw my family, Mark beaming, my in-laws watching with quiet pride. Even Amanda's absence no longer felt like a wound, but a marker of the past we have finally faced. Sometimes, I told the crowd, the hardest frauds to uncover are the ones hidden behind family loyalty. But true loyalty isn't about silence. It's about having the courage to stop someone you love from hurting themselves and others. After the ceremony, my mother-in-law hugged me tightly. "You saved our family," she whispered, "not by catching Amanda, but by showing us we needed to change." That evening, as Mark and I walked home through the city, he suddenly stopped. "You know what Amanda told me yesterday," he said. "She said that, in a weird way, you did her the biggest favor of her life. Getting caught, finally facing consequences, it's the first time she's had to really look at herself." I squeezed his hand. "Sometimes," I said, "the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from themselves." The city lights glowed around us, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The truth hadn't destroyed this family, as Amanda had once threatened. It had made it stronger. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air, wrapping the Parker household in a festive warmth, but the chill in my mother-in-law's voice cut through it like an icy wind. "Those foster kids aren't real family, Emily. I can't believe you're bringing them to our annual portrait session." I stood in her immaculate kitchen, fingers tightening around the pie dish I had spent the morning baking. Across from me, Sandra adjusted a gleaming ornament on her perfectly curated Christmas tree, as if she hadn't just dismissed the 3 children who had brought light back into my life. At 34, I never imagined I'd have to justify my place as a mother, especially not to a woman who had spent the last decade reminding me that I couldn't have real children of my own. "They have names, Sandra," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fire simmering beneath my skin. "Lily is 7, Marcus is 10, and Jack is 13, and they are as much a part of this family as anyone else." Sandra turned, her manicured hands clasped primly in front of her designer sweater. "Oh, honey," she cooed, the condescension in her tone as sharp as ever. "I know you mean well, but these temporary arrangements aren't the same as real grandchildren. I can't get attached to children who might disappear in a few months." The irony of her words nearly made me laugh. If only she knew. If only she understood who these children truly were. But that revelation wasn't for tonight. Not yet. They're not temporary, I said, setting the pie down on her pristine marble countertop. I'm in the process of adopting them. The ornament in her hand slipped, shattering against the hardwood floor. Adopting, she echoed, her voice rising an octave. Without consulting the family? What about Robert's inheritance, his family name? Right on cue, my husband walked in, arms full of carefully wrapped gifts. I'd asked him to leave the kids in the car until I had spoken to Sandra, and judging by her reaction, that had been the right call. What's wrong with adoption, Mom? Robert asked, setting the gifts beside my pie. Emily's been fostering them for 8 months. They're amazing kids. Sandra's lips pressed into a thin line. Amazing or not, they aren't Parkers. They don't share our blood, our history. What will people at the country club think? Robert's hand found mine, his grip warm and reassuring. He knew how much Sandra's words stung, how they reopened wounds we had spent years trying to heal. We have fought for a family, suffered through 3 miscarriages, and finally made peace with the idea that biology did not define love. And then, miraculously, we had found Lily, Marcus, and Jack. A family born not of blood, but of love. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, they have more history with this family than you realize. I scrolled to the old newspaper clipping I had found while researching the children's past. A discovery that would shatter Sandra's carefully crafted reality. But before I could show her, she waved a dismissive hand. I don't need to hear their sob story, Emily. It doesn't change anything. The family portrait is for real Parkers. I won't have it turned into some charity project. Robert stepped forward, his voice firm. Mom, that's enough. The kids are coming to the portrait session. That's final. Then I'll reschedule with Patricia, Sandra snapped, referring to her favorite photographer. I won't have my Christmas cards ruined by what, Sandra? I interrupted, my patience finally snapping. By 3 incredible children who have endured more hardship than you could imagine. Who have brought more love into this family in 8 months than your country club has in years. A thick silence filled the space between us. The only sound the distant melody of Christmas carols drifting from the living room. Sandra stared at me stunned. In 12 years of marriage, I had never spoken to her like this. Robert exhaled. I think we should go home. We'll discuss the portrait session later. As we stepped outside, the cold air wrapped around me, but it couldn't quell the fire burning in my chest. In the car, the kids waited patiently, their laughter filling the space like the very warmth Sandra refused to let in. As I glanced back at the house, I saw Sandra standing at the window, watching us. I thought of the envelope tucked safely in my home office. The DNA test results proving that Lily, Marcus, and Jack weren't just any children. They were the grandchildren of Sandra's long-lost sister, the woman she never spoke about, the secret she had buried for decades. Tomorrow's portrait session would change everything. Robert squeezed my hand as he drove, his silent support grounding me. You okay? He asked softly. I exhaled, gazing at the kids in the back seat, their faces alight with excitement over what movie to watch that night. I will be, I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. Because family isn't about blood, it's about love. But in this case, it just so happened to be both. And Sandra Parker was about to learn that in the most unexpected way possible. The morning air was crisp, the kind that turned breath into clouds and painted the sky a sharp winter blue, perfect for family portraits. As I carefully braided Lily's dark curls, I couldn't help but notice how much she resembled the old photographs I found of Sandra's sister. Those same deep brown eyes, that same quiet, knowing smile. Do you think Grandma Sandra will like my dress? Lily twirled in her blue velvet dress, the fabric catching the light as she spun. It matched her brother's sweaters, a deliberate choice. The hope in her voice made my chest tighten. She's going to love it, sweetheart, I assured her, even as doubt curled in my stomach. Could Sandra truly be called Grandma yet? The DNA results in my purse suggested she could, but acceptance was something else entirely. Jack, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, already looked uncomfortable in his neatly pressed clothes. She won't. She hates us, he muttered, his voice carrying the blunt certainty of a 13-year-old who had seen too much. She doesn't hate you? Robert said as he stepped up behind Jack, resting a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. She's just set in her ways, but she'll come around. His gaze met mine, the silent determination there mirroring my own. Today would change everything. When we arrived at the portrait studio, Sandra was already there, instructing Patricia, the photographer, with clipped precision. Her expression tightened as we entered, her eyes scanning our coordinated outfits before landing on the children. "I see you brought everyone," she said, the smile on her lips not quite reaching her eyes. "Of course we did, Mom," Robert replied evenly. "We're all family here." Before I could stop him, Marcus, the quietest of the three, stepped forward. "Mrs. Parker, I have something to show you." He reached into his pocket and carefully unfolded a photograph. A faded image of his birth mother, Sandra's niece, taken just months before the accident that had left the children orphaned. Sandra's face paled as she stared at the picture. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "It was my mom's," Marcus said, holding his head high. "She told me it was taken at Pine Grove." I saw the name hit Sandra like a blow. Pine Grove. The family's summer home, the place she and her sister, Catherine, had spent childhood summers before their relationship fractured beyond repair. Sandra turned sharply toward me. "Emily," her voice was taut, controlled. "What is this about?" I exhaled, acutely aware of the photographer's assistant pretending not to eavesdrop. Maybe we should step outside for a moment. But Sandra didn't move. Her grip on the photograph tightened. "No, I want to know now." I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing against the neatly folded DNA test results. "These children," I said quietly, "are Catherine's grandchildren. Their mother, Sarah, was your niece. I discovered the connection while researching their background for the adoption." Silence settled over the studio, thick and heavy. Even the children, normally so restless, stood frozen. Sandra's lips parted, but no words came at first. Her gaze flickered over the kids, taking them in, truly seeing them for the first time. "Catherine," she murmured, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw unshed tears in my mother-in-law's eyes. "I haven't spoken to her since. Since she married someone you didn't approve of," I finished gently. "These are her grandchildren, Sandra. Your family, the family you said didn't belong in your portraits." Sandra sank into the nearest chair, still staring at the photograph. "Sarah," she whispered. "I never even knew she had children. After Catherine left." She trailed off, her eyes finally lifting to meet Lily's. "She has her eyes." "Yes," I said. "And Marcus has your mother's smile. Jack has the Parker height. Turns out Catherine married a distant cousin of Robert's father." Robert stepped forward then, his voice steady. "Mom, these kids aren't just a temporary arrangement. They're our family in every possible way. By love, by choice, and yes, by blood." For the first time since we'd arrived, Sandra moved with purpose. She crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of Lily, who hesitated before peeking up at her. Sandra's breath hitched. "I've been so foolish," she said, her voice breaking. "So caught up in appearances that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." Lily, with the kind of forgiveness only children possess, reached out and took Sandra's hand. "It's okay, Grandma Sandra. Do you want to see my dress? Mommy helped me pick it for the pictures." And just like that, the ice began to thaw. Sandra pulled all three children into her arms, holding them tightly, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. Patricia, ever the professional, discreetly adjusted her camera, capturing this unexpected moment of reconciliation. What followed wasn't the stiff, perfectly posed session Sandra had likely envisioned. Instead, Patricia captured real moments. Sandra smoothing Lily's hair, laughing through her tears as Marcus showed her more family photos. Jack finally, relaxing enough to smile. As I watched Sandra transform before my eyes, I realized that sometimes family isn't just about history, it's about choices, about opening doors that once seemed closed forever. The real work of healing would take time. But as Sandra fussed over her children, straightening their collars, brushing away stray strands of hair, I knew we had taken the first step toward becoming the family we were always meant to be. The changes in Sandra over the next few months were remarkable to watch. The woman who once cared only about appearances and social status now spent her weekends helping Lily plant a butterfly garden, teaching Marcus to bake her secret family recipes, and attending every single one of Jack's soccer games. One Sunday afternoon, as I watched her showing the kids' old family albums in our living room, she called me over. "Emily, look what I found," she said, pulling out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a letter from her sister Catherine, dated just months before the accident that claimed Sarah's life. I never opened it, Sandra admitted, her voice thick with regret. I was too proud, too stubborn. And now, she looked at the children, who were absorbed in photos of their grandmother as a young woman. Now I'll never get to make things right with her. I sat beside her on the couch. You're making things right with them, I said softly. That counts for something. She nodded, carefully unfolding the letter. As she read, tears rolled down her cheeks. She wanted to reconcile, she whispered. She wrote about Sarah, about the kids. She wanted us to be a family again. And now we are, Robert said, joining us with a tray of hot chocolate. Another new tradition Sandra had started. Just not in the way anyone expected. The transformation wasn't just in Sandra's relationship with the kids. She'd become a different kind of mother-in-law to me too. Gone were the subtle jabs about my inability to have biological children, replaced by genuine appreciation for how I brought her family back together. One evening, as we prepared for another family dinner, now a weekly occurrence, Sandra pulled me aside. I've been thinking, she said, nervously smoothing her skirt. I'd like to set up a trust fund for the children's education. Not because they need to meet some social standard, she added quickly, but because it's what Catherine would have wanted for her grandchildren. I hugged her, something that would have been unthinkable a few months ago. She would have loved that, I said. And she would have loved seeing you with them now. The adoption became final on a bright spring morning. Sandra sat in the front row of the courthouse, beaming with pride as the judge made it official. The kids were legally ours, though they'd been ours in heart since the day they arrived. You know, Sandra said at the celebration lunch afterward, I always thought family was about maintaining the Parker name, about keeping our bloodline pure and proper. She looked around the table at our beautifully blended family, Robert and me, the kids, even Patricia, the photographer who'd become a close friend. But real family is this. It's love and forgiveness and second chances. Lily climbed into her lap, something that now seemed perfectly natural. Tell us more about Grandma Catherine, she asked, a request that had become common at family gatherings. And Sandra did, sharing stories she'd kept locked away for decades. With each tale, the missing pieces of our family history fell into place, and the children learned of the grandmother they'd never met through the aunt who finally opened her heart to them. That summer, Sandra suggested reopening Pine Grove, the summer home she'd closed after her falling out with Catherine. It's time to make new memories there, she said. Happy ones. Watching the kids run through the same gardens where their grandmother had played, seeing Sandra teach them the same family traditions she'd once shared with Catherine, I realized we created something beautiful from the ashes of old pain. You know, Sandra said one evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I spent so many years focused on what family should look like that I almost missed out on what it could be. Thank you, Emily, for not giving up on me. I squeezed her hand, remembering the tense Christmas gathering that had started it all. Thank you for being brave enough to change. The sound of laughter drew our attention to the yard, where Robert was chasing the kids through the sprinkler, all of them soaked and happy. Sandra's perfect lawn was getting muddy. Her carefully tended flowers were slightly trampled, and she didn't seem to mind at all. Catherine would have loved this, she said softly. She always said I needed to loosen up, to see that life was meant to be lived, not just photographed and displayed. As if to prove her point, Lily ran up and pulled us both into the water fight, designer clothes and all. And there we were, the proper Sandra Parker, laughing and playing in the mud with her great nieces and nephew, finally understanding what real family meant. In the end, it wasn't about blood or status or perfectly posed portraits. It was about love, acceptance, and the courage to open our hearts to unexpected joy. Our family might not have come together in the traditional way, but it was real as the laughter echoing through the summer evening, as real as the love that had brought us all home.